Hi everyone. Let's just give it a minute and then we will start at 12:01. Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to another webinar Wednesday. Whether you are tuning in live or watching the recording on demand, we are thrilled that you've chosen to spend part of your day with us. Today's webinar is an especially exciting one. Is your business ready to let go of legacy? Together with Christo Greef and Virgil Peru, we'll explore how modernizing your applications with Microsoft can cut costs, boost performance, and future-proof your organization. You can expect a dynamic session filled with insights, practical takeaways, and engaging real-world examples. And don't forget, stick around after the main presentation because we've reserved some time for your questions. Your participation is what turns these sessions from presentations into true conversations. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. If you are watching live, please send your questions through the chat or the QA function. Today's session is being recorded and the link will be shared to all registered attendees after the session. To stay in the loop on future topics, be sure to follow us on our social media channels. And with that being said, let's get started. Over to you, Christo and Virgil.
Cool. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm assuming my audio is good, so let me know if it's not. I think we appreciate people joining. We know people have lots going on every day, and for you to join is great. It means that you're interested in what we want to talk about today. But we're also going to try and keep it simple. We're not going to try to make it too complex. We don't want to use lots of jargon, no complicated theory, just a couple of things to think about, and then maybe some practical aspects, and yeah, see how it goes. So what we want to try and cover today is just a reality check. Why legacy systems might be holding you back. And then talk about the modernization roadmap. So things that we think works. Look at some real results. And then also what your next steps might be. Also, I think some of you might experience this already. You have that application that's not quite modern yet. It's sitting on a server, maybe on premise somewhere. It works, but you know it's actually costing you maybe a fortune, and it might be driving some people crazy. You know, sometimes when you run a big report, it crashes at certain times, and then there's some group or the group of developers or someone that needs to go and look at it, and they keep on reminding you, we need to rebuild this thing, or we need to do something about this application. So I think that might ring a bell with some of you. So let's see if we can address some of that today. I'm gonna just highlight this. I think Pranay, you'll just also start the poll for us. And then I'll hand over to Virgil to kick us off.
Thank you, Christo. So the hidden cost of it still works. Let's take a minute to address that elephant in the room. Picture a thriving restaurant that's slowly been taken over by a myriad of issues, right? You're spending 70% of your budget keeping that old broken down delivery truck running instead of improving the restaurant. The roof is leaking everywhere, so your talented chefs spend their days mopping instead of cooking. Your old locks and security systems that you have is making your business an easy target for break-ins. The best chefs won't interview with you because they don't want to work with outdated. They don't want to work in outdated conditions. Now, your restaurant can't innovate new dishes, and you're hemorrhaging money on repairs. You're vulnerable to theft, and you can't attract good staff. Meanwhile, your competitors with modern kitchens, reliable equipment, proper security, and happy teams are stealing your customers and growing fast. Azure App Modernization is like renovating your entire restaurant at once, fixing the roof and upgrading security, buying reliable equipment, and creating a modern workspace. Suddenly, your chefs can focus on creating amazing food dishes. Your budget shifts from repairs to growth investments. You're protected from modern threats. Top talent want to work with you. The result? You stop bleeding money and you start making it in life. You stop falling behind your competitors and you start leading in the market. That is the true business impact. Transformation from survival mode to growth mode. So with Azure App Modernization, the real business impact that you're seeing on the screen now is not just IT metrics. They translate directly to competitive advantage and bottom line results. Your teams can deploy up to 208 times more frequently and recover 24 times faster than traditional teams. On average, companies that implement mature DevOps practices report a 20 to 30% reduction in development and operational costs. This is primarily down to fewer manual processes and faster time to market and reduced downtime. New features are developed and deployed faster to market than using traditional methods, right? And cloud platforms enhance reliability and uptime by offering features such as automatic scaling and uptime guarantees, making high availability a core benefit rather than an additional concern. So we've all heard of the terminology called pain points. So I'm going to address a couple of legacy system pain points now. And let's think of integration nightmare. You have a 15-year-old inventory system that can't talk to your new e-commerce platform that you've started using. So every online order that you make through your system has to be manually re-entered into the warehouse system. So ultimately, what should become an automatic data flow becomes a daily data entry marathon prone to errors and delays. Let's take a manual workaround. You have a legacy HR system that crashes every time you generate a payroll report. So what your team does then is they export the data to Excel, do the calculations, upload it back into the system, and then an automated process that should take 10 minutes turns into a 3-hour manual ordeal at every pay period. Let's talk about version chaos. If you have a company might have 3 different versions of the same customer database across various departments. As a result, Department A won't know the telephone number for the customer. Department B might have the incorrect address or an outdated address, and customer C is working with outdated sales information. For scaling struggles, a legacy order processing system that was built to handle 100 orders per day, you are now sitting on perhaps processing 100 times more than that. As a result, your system crashes the moment you get to a very processing effective day. So let's take Black Friday, for example. Usually you would do 100 orders per day. On Black Friday, you would do maybe 5,000 orders, and that then causes your system to crash, right?
Thanks, Virgil. So taking into account what Virgil highlighted now, in terms of the pain points and the potential benefits. How do we get from having a legacy application or an application that can perform better into something that is adequate for your business? So we define 3 paths that you can take. So it's lift and shift, refactor, or rebuild. Now, I'm just going to open another link here as well. So something that we typically also follow is the Azure well-architected framework. And some of you might also know that, or I've seen in the past that they refer to the 6 R's. But typically we just focus on the 3 parts: lift and shift, refactor, and rebuild. So lift and shift is basically taking your legacy application into the cloud, hopefully without breaking anything. You take it as it is to Azure, not making any fancy changes, not rewriting too much code. Hopefully it's fairly quick, it's low risk, and you can potentially see some cost savings immediately or within a very short space in time. Refactor, potentially the middle ground. You move to the cloud, but you also optimize a couple of things. And then there's rebuild, which is the full Monty. It's like redoing everything. But just to go into detail on the lift and shift or rehost. So again, minimal risk. So taking your application in maybe from on-premise running on a VM, maybe to an app service in Azure. If you know you're going to use the application for a year, 3 years, maybe longer, you can already see some cost savings there if you implement some reserved instances on Azure, which typically can result in quite a huge cost saving. Again, minimal code changes. Yeah, the cons are it doesn't maximize cloud native benefits, but it's a good start just to get into Azure. The other con is just carrying forward technical debt. So putting it into Azure doesn't fix some of the performance issues, but it does put it in a shinier place, if you will. Cool. Refactor, the second option. I think it's a good middle ground. So moderate modernization, balanced approach. That's where you start optimizing for the cloud. You start leveraging some of the platform as a services. You start implementing some architecture changes. And that's where you will also start seeing some benefits like better performance, scalability, potentially some reduced operational overhead, and improved developer productivity. So with CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous deployments, that's where you would start seeing some of the benefits that Virgil pointed out earlier, more frequent deployments. I think you said 208 times more frequently that you can potentially deploy. So I think what I'm going to do is just maybe switch gears for a bit. So I'm going to try not to break anything, but just to show some of the tools that are available for us to start looking at modernizing an application. It's just to open a solution. And this is the solution I just found online. It's in GitHub. And this is a legacy application. So it's still MVC. It's still .NET Framework 4.5 here. So immediately, Visual Studio says, okay, do you want to upgrade this to .NET Framework 4.8? I just say continue. So 2 simple tools that's already available, for example, within Visual Studio is the ability to run a replatform report on the solution. So that gives you some insights into what needs to be done to put your on-premise or your legacy application into Azure. And then there's also an extension that gives you pointers on upgrading your solution. So for example, if we replatform, we select this one, we say new report. And let's say, for example, we want to run this within an app service a Windows app service on Azure. We select this one. Obviously have options like running it in a Kubernetes service or maybe a container app. And let's pick this one. Select the solution, analyze. So really, this tool then identifies a couple of aspects that you need to look into: security, being 2 items, scale, performance, some localization and connection aspects. So already it shows you where potentially you have to spend a lot of your time. It looks like security, performance potentially. What's nice is it also breaks it down into almost like stories or specific issues, like connection with some details, what you have to do to address that. There's some assembly, some older code, libraries that needs to be looked at. Yeah, performance issues. So let's run the upgrade one as well. And this for this give us options of to which library or framework in Microsoft you want, or for your solution you want to upgrade to. Analyze again. Might run a little bit longer. I hope not too long, but this is already a great indicator of where you need to spend your time with modernizing your solution. Now, I know this is not the biggest solution, but the same principle applies for solutions that are small, that are bigger. You can break them down. You can follow the Strangler fig tree approach, where you start modernizing certain parts of your application. You don't have to modernize everything at once. So you can start breaking it down into different solutions or projects or services, but you have the tools already available to help you make decisions around where to focus. And I think, like all of us know, no presentation is complete these days without some AI in there. So I think something that is a huge benefit also is AI. So if, for example, we say, I've GitHub Copilot, in this case, enabled. I've selected the agent, and let's just say I want to modernize the solution. At the bottom right here, I want to modernize the solution by analyzing which packages should be upgraded. If you created .NET new or newer version of the solution should be hosted in a Docker container in the Azure cloud. So I'm not going to go into the technical detail around this, but let's ask AI what it thinks. And I might not wait for this to complete because it might run a while. But again, it already gives you a great indication of what AI points out. Some of it might be similar to the upgrade report or the rehosting report, but potentially in a more actionable manner. So here we can see, for example, it came back with quite a few steps, some obsolete items to replace, some solution restructuring. There's data aspects that you have to look at, some data structure aspects, logging, security. Just going to wait for it to finish until the end. So again, quite a few things that were picked up. And then because this is an agent mode, you can also try to apply this, but I'm not going to be that brave today. Keep the light to go back on. Sorry. So again, we have the tools available to migrate some of these legacy applications, and specifically with some of the Microsoft tooling and also AI is not as difficult as it potentially was in the past. Cool. So switching back to PowerPoint, the last option that we have is our rebuild. So rebuild is the Rolls-Royce or the full Monty option. So this is where we take the legacy application, we redo it from scratch. We re-architect it. We decide on maybe on a microservices architecture. We use containers. We use API management gateway. We use AI. So again, this is the full Monty option where you potentially need a lot more time. You're also willing to risk a bit more, which also ties into the next slide. How do we decide? So it depends on your need. So if you look at the assessment matrix, we have lift and shift, which is if you have a high time pressure, you have to get your legacy application into the cloud. You have to start modernizing it. Maybe lift and shift is the option. If you have limited budget also, maybe low risk tolerance, and maybe your innovation goal is just to maintain, then lift and shift is the option to look at. At the other end of the scale, if you let's say we have low time pressures, you have more flexible budget, you are willing to take on a bit more risk, then maybe rebuild is the option for you. And or maybe something in the middle. Maybe start with a refactor where time pressure is medium, budget is moderate, risk tolerance again medium. So again, it will differ from solution to solution. It will differ from business to business, but this is typically the factors that we look at when deciding which path to take. Oh, Virgil.
Cool. Thank you, Crystal. So let us show you why Azure is not just another cloud provider, but also a modernization accelerator. Right? So we've got Azure as enterprise grade, which is built to deliver mission critical reliability and security standards required for your business workloads. Azure also has a hybrid first approach, which simply means that you have seamless transitions from on-premises to cloud without disrupting your existing operations. Azure also has a unified platform that combines M365, Power Platform, and AI services for streamlined productivity. In terms of cost optimization, Azure allows you to, or potentially allows you to reduce your expenses up to 72% through reserved instances, and with Azure Hybrid benefit licensing, it enables customers to use their Windows Server and Windows and SQL Server licenses with active software assurance for quality subscription licenses to significantly lower costs in Azure. Now, let's talk a bit about the modernization path, like Crystal mentioned earlier. With lift and shift, you have services such as Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Fabric, and Azure Storage that can be leveraged for the lift and shift path. For refactoring, you've got services such as App Services, Azure Functions, and Azure Container Instances. For rebuilding, there's services such as Azure Kubernetes, Azure Service Fabric, and Azure API Management for the rebuilding path. In terms of security and compliance, this is one of the biggest modernization concerns, right? And Azure addresses this head on. So for identity integration, we have identity and access management in the form of Azure Entra ID, and this provides centralized identity management and single sign-on access for all your enterprise applications. There's data protection, which simply works by encrypting data both at rest and during transmission to ensure complete information security. Azure also maintains 90+ compliance certifications to meet global regulatory requirements across industries. In terms of threat detection, there is Microsoft Defender for Cloud that delivers real-time monitoring and automated threat response to protect against cyber attacks. In terms of compliance standards, as mentioned before, there are currently over 90 compliance certificates. But in terms of major frameworks, which I'm sure you've heard of before, there's ISO, HIPAA, and GDPR for comprehensive regulatory coverage. So now I'm going to get into a case study, and this is for insurance transformation, right? So picture this: you are an insurance agent that sends out quotations to customers, or customers contact you through email and you need to provide a quotation to them. So on a daily basis, you get plus minus 100 emails. For each email, you firstly need to determine what the request is, and you need to take the information out of the email. Remember, every email might contain attachments and images and so forth. So you need to take out that information, fill it into an Excel document, convert that to a PDF, send it back to the client. The client then comes back and says, can you please change third-party cover or extra windscreen cover? You make those changes again, you send it back. So it's a back and forth process, right? What we've done is we've automated the emails coming in. So what I'm simply meaning is that every email that comes in gets classified, whether it is a query, whether it is a new quote that's required. We're using Azure OpenAI for natural language processing to extract key information from the email and its content. And then we classify the content. So if it's a quote, if it's a claim, if it's a complaint, we use Azure Logic apps in the background to orchestrate the complex workflows between emails and line of business systems, so that we can create the quote with the backend processes, right? Ultimately, what happens is that as the agent, when they fill it into Excel, that takes about 30 minutes, right? Then the back and forth, that takes up to 24 hours, or in some cases 48 hours, depending on how frequent the client responds. With the solution, we've trimmed that 48 hours down to a process of 5 minutes, where it comes in to going to the insurance agent so that they can review. Remember, with these systems, especially with insurance, you have to first review before sending to a client, so that you can ensure all the information is correct. So that is why we have a up to 90% faster processing, because the process goes from 48 hours to just under 5 minutes. And as you know, because it's in the cloud, all the services are running 24/7, so there's 100% availability. Reporting, that is done through Microsoft Fabric and Power BI. So that gives the management team the ability to zoom in and see what aspects of the process is taking too long. It could be maybe that someone is taking too long to review a request, or it could just be that we haven't gotten a response from a client. In that case, you can do follow-ups faster, and you can bring business in faster as well. Thank you, Christo.
Thanks, Virgil. So if we look at another case study, or maybe before I look at the case study, is I think a huge benefit before modernizing a legacy app is also to have already adopted Azure. So often, or not often, but sometimes the path might be to start using Azure and to start modernizing, but it is beneficial if you have already adopted Azure. We've seen that in the past as well, where once the client has already adopted Azure, we have some of the infrastructure in place already, some of the security aspects have already been covered, then the modernization path is also a lot easier. If we look at the healthcare case study, so again, if we take a solution into account that used to be a monolithic application, it used to run on premises, it used to use SQL Server, not scalable, older .NET frameworks, and then started modernizing the solution. Also then, with that path that we chose was a complete re-architecture or rebuild. We chose the microservices route built on Azure Kubernetes, broke all the services into smaller services, so separate services within the Kubernetes cluster. API management gateway to allow the front end to communicate to the services, and then also started implementing Azure OpenAI. So with Azure OpenAI, it helps program managers to identify patients at risk, predict some program outcomes. And because we use microservices, we could add the OpenAI intelligence without touching the core data services for the solution, because it's all incremental builds and components that we added to the solution. Also implementing zero trust security, again, to my point earlier, if we already have the ability within Azure to use Intra, for example, or we have the access to Azure B2C, for example, that makes the modernization path a lot easier as well. Cool. So in terms of typical return on investment timeline, so this is indicative, but typically we start looking at modernizing the application. So from month 1 to 3, we start looking at the Azure infrastructure costs. So that is the lift and ship portion. So we can already start showing savings on hardware. So implementing, like Virgil said, reserved instances, consolidating some services within Azure, maybe use Azure functions where the function is only build when you call it. I think that's where the infrastructure cost savings can start. Then from month 4 to 6 is where the operational efficiency gains start. That's where the faster deployments or the more frequent deployments, where you have the infrastructure in place, you have the deployment aspects in place to be able to deploy faster and starts being a bit more agile. From month 7 to month 12, for example, that's where the innovation starts. Maybe you start adding some of the more modern services like Azure OpenAI or some of the other cognitive services available. And then after year 2, you really start seeing a competitive advantage. You're a lot more agile in your approach to adding features to the solution, and also market expansion. So if you, for example, leverage some of the AI services that gives you access potentially to new markets, that's also like a huge competitive advantage.
Cool, thanks, Russell. So during the assessment and planning phase, well, we typically refer to it as the proactive phase. We firstly discover all existing applications and their dependencies. We also, secondly, map application interdependencies and document the architecture, the technology stacks, and any integrations. Thirdly, applications are prioritized based on business value and strategic importance. And then finally, application complexity is determined based on the 6R principle, that is the rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild, and replace, so that we can define the target Azure architecture and service selection. Under the pilot implementation, so what we do in this phase is the 1 to 3 applications that are prioritized, they should have moderate complexity, but not too simple or too complex. For if it is too simple, it won't be able to prove the capabilities. And if it's too complex, it would be high risk. We choose the applications that can provide the quick wins. And in every cycle, document all the lessons learned and validate any assumptions against actual results. So that is your gathering feedback block. Every lesson learned, you document it and you cycle through that until you are content. Thanks, Crystal.
Cool. Then phase 3, scale transformation. So the duration might be 16 to 18 months, depending on the scope. Again, phased rollout. Modernize your applications in logical groups. Maybe start with HR systems or finance systems, or maybe certain processes within the business. Like which also alluded to, it's high risk to just start doing everything at once. So whatever makes sense for your business, attempt doing a phased or implement using a phased approach. Then change management. So we also refer to that as digital enablement. That's quite crucial. Typically, that already starts in phase 1. So if you want to implement a POC, maybe it's not the right time, but this digital enablement or change management should start as early as possible. You have to keep people trained and communicating around what's happening. I think people also buy in when they are included in the process as early as possible. Then governance also. So proper governance is important. So especially if you're starting your journey on modernization. So what are your cloud-first policies? What are your security standards? That sort of thing. Set the rules now so that your future projects follow the same patterns. And then optimization. Optimization is an ongoing process. So again, Virgil referred to reserved instances of services. So looking at your costs on the monthly level, seeing where you can optimize costs, seeing where you can consolidate services, looking at performance, costs, usage patterns, all these tools in Azure is available to continuously optimize. Yeah, the goal is to create a sustainable modernization practice, not just a one-time project. It's not about creating or taking a single application and modernizing it. As soon as you see the value from that, you'll have a sustainable modernization practice within your business. Well, then critical success factors. I think we have touched on some of them, but leadership commitment or buy-in. So that's a critical success factor. Also a clear communication and vision of benefits. So again, once you start your modernization journey, have a clear communication and vision of the benefits thereof. User adoption again, early involvement in the design process. Again, change management, digital enablement, involve people as soon as possible, providing comprehensive training and support. Again, if you have a project or a champion for some of these projects, that also typically helps a lot with user adoption. Then team preparation, another critical success factor. Skills development and training. Don't assume some of your developers or team members know how to set up a Kubernetes cluster overnight, for example. So if that is the route that you're going, invest in proper training. It will pay off in the long run. Also get your IT and business teams talking to each other. The cross-functional collaboration aspect. So have people communicate, talk about the challenges, and then preparing all the business units and IT teams during the process. And then measurement. Define your success metrics upfront. Maybe you want to see a improvement in performance. Maybe you want to lower costs. Maybe you want to have better user satisfaction. Whatever that measure is, define it from day one so that you can prove the value during the process and adjust as quickly or as fast as possible when things aren't working for you. I think that also speaks to regular progress reviews and adjustments. So have regular progress reviews. See where you are, evaluate where you are, and adjust accordingly. Maybe you realize that Azure SQL isn't working for you. Maybe you should use Fabric, or maybe you should use Cosmos DB as an example. So again, it depends on what you find during those regular progress reviews.
Cool. So in terms of common questions, here's a few modernization questions that typically get asked. Question might be, how do we assess which of our legacy apps are good candidates for modernization? As Christo showed earlier, there's built-in tools that can be used to help drive the modernization assessment. Another question is, how do cloud apps connect with our existing on-premise systems? You can actually use Azure VPN Gateway or Azure Express Route for a dedicated private connection. And another question is, will our cloud costs be higher than our current infrastructure costs? Now, this is a very good question, or a very broad question as well. but it simply depends on your situation, right? As we said earlier on, using reserved instances or the hybrid benefit will reduce this cost. And additionally, energy and hardware costs are then eliminated. So you could typically take from what you would be spending to upscale on something else to sort of get to a middle ground. Another question is Azure secure enough for our sensitive data and compliance requirements? Yes, Azure provides better security than most on-premise environments these days, and with the added benefit that there are continuous updates and monitoring by world-class security teams. Christo, that's it from me. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Virgil. I think on that last point, I would be hard pressed to see an on-premise data center that's more secure than Azure these days. So just in terms of immediate actions, so what's the next steps? So assess your current state, decide where you want to go, then connect with Mint. Let us know where we can help. Start small. Maybe you have a single solution that you want to modernize or want to move to Azure, and then build your business case. One Mint will work for you. I see number 1 and number 4. There's both number 1, so maybe both of them should be number 1. And then some of the other things, resources provided there. So we typically also follow the cloud adoption framework. So this is a Microsoft framework. There's tools available like the Microsoft Azure pricing calculator, which gives actually a great view into costs. So again, we've used that extensively, so we can help with that. Case study deep dive reports. I think Lucy does a great job of, Lucy and the marketing team at least does a great job at updating our case studies for us and publishing them on our website. And then again, just contact us for follow-ups. That's it from us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have one last poll before we sign off. Renee will launch it in the chat soon. But yes, that brings us to the end of today's webinar Wednesday. A huge thank you to Christo and Virgil for sharing such valuable insights, and of course to all of you for joining us. Before we sign off, Christo, if you can just go to the next slide for me. Let's take a look at what's coming up for our next webinar Wednesday series. On the 8th of October, please join us where we'll explore the latest AI-powered advancements in Microsoft Dynamics 365. You can already secure your spot by using the registration link in the chat that will be posted soon. Then yes, thank you once again for spending your afternoon with us. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar Wednesday. And then up until then, enjoy the rest of your day and goodbye for now.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.